The massive space station hung in the void like a metal city. Ships from dozens of worlds docked at its many ports. Inside the council chambers, alien voices filled the air with urgent discussions. The Galactic Council had ruled over thousands of star systems for more than 1,000 years. Today they faced their biggest crisis yet. Ambassador Veltar of the Krex Empire stood at the center of the circular room. His thick armor gleamed under the bright lights. The Krex were known across the galaxy as the greatest warriors. Their ships could destroy entire moons with a single shot. Other species feared and respected them in equal measure. The reports are clear, Veltar said in his deep, growling voice. The Devourers have consumed 3 more star systems in the Outer Rim. They move faster than we predicted. Our fleets cannot match their speed. The other council members shifted nervously in their seats. The Zephyrians, with their pale blue skin and large eyes, whispered among themselves. They were the masters of technology in the galaxy. Their ships could bend space and time itself. If they were worried, then the situation was truly bad. How many systems have we lost now? Asked Counselor Yathara, her tentacles curling with anxiety. 17 confirmed, replied the Krex warrior. Possibly more. The Devourers leave nothing behind. No planets, no debris, nothing. They consume everything, even the stars themselves. At the back of the chamber, in the smallest section reserved for minor species, sat the human representative. Ambassador Sarah Chen looked much like any other. Human, average height, brown hair, wearing a simple blue uniform. The other council members barely noticed her presence. Humans had only joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago. They were still considered newcomers. Earth was a small world in a quiet corner of the galaxy. Humans had basic technology and a tiny space fleet. They mostly traded food and simple manufactured goods with other worlds. The Council saw them as harmless and useful, but not important. They were the kind of species that older civilizations protected rather than feared. Ambassador Chen raised her hand to speak. The chamber fell silent, though not out of respect. The aliens were simply surprised that the human had something to say during such a serious discussion. The Earth Defense Force would like to offer assistance, Chen said in a calm voice. We have ships ready to join the fight against the Devourers. Several council members made sounds that might have been laughter. The Krex ambassador's eyes narrowed with what looked like amusement. That is very generous, Veltar said, his tone making it clear he thought it was anything but helpful. However, this enemy requires our most advanced weapons and experienced warriors. Your ships would be better used defending your home system. A Zephyrian named Kethmore leaned forward. His species valued politeness, so he tried to be more diplomatic. The human offer is appreciated, but the Devourers have already destroyed fleets with weapons far more advanced than anything Earth possesses. We cannot risk civilian vessels in this conflict. Chen nodded slowly. I understand your concerns, but humans have dealt with dangerous enemies before. We might be more helpful than you think. This time, the laughter was more open. The insectoid, representative from the Hive Collective, clicked her mandibles in what passed for amusement among her kind. Even some of the normally serious Vorthak delegates showed the slight head tilts that meant they found something funny. No offense intended, said Counselor Yathara, but humanity has never faced anything like the Devourers. Your species has been at peace for decades. You have no experience with this kind of warfare. Chen's expression did not change. She simply nodded again. Very well. Earth will respect the Council's decision. We will focus on defending our own territory and helping with refugee efforts. That would be most appropriate, Veltar agreed. Leave the fighting to those who understand it. The meeting continued for several more hours. Military leaders presented battle plans and casualty reports. The situation grew worse with each update. The Devourers moved like a plague across the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. No weapon seemed to slow them down. No defense could stop them. As the session ended, the various ambassadors filed out of the chamber. Many gathered in small groups to discuss private alliances and backup plans. The smaller species looked to the larger ones for protection. The major powers argued about strategies and resources. Chen walked alone toward the human quarters. She passed groups of aliens who were too busy with their own conversations to notice her. This was normal. Humans were easy to ignore in galactic politics. But if any of the other species had looked closely, they might have noticed something odd about the human ambassador's behavior. Chen did not seem worried or afraid like the others. She did not rush to make emergency calls to her home government. Instead, she walked with the steady pace of someone who had important work to do, but was not panicked about it. In her private quarters, Chen activated a secure communication device. The screen showed another human, this one wearing a military uniform. Admiral Marcus Webb had gray hair and tired eyes, but his voice was strong and clear. "How did they respond to the offer?" Webb asked. "Exactly as predicted," Chen replied. "They see us as helpful children who should stay out of the way while the adults handle the real problems." "Good. That makes things simpler." Webb paused for a moment. "The Council fleets are getting destroyed faster than we expected. The Devourers are more aggressive than our models suggested. Should we move up the timeline?" "Not yet. We need to let this play out a little longer. The Council needs to understand just how hopeless their situation really is. Only then will they appreciate what we bring to the table." Chen nodded. "The Outer Rim colonies are requesting immediate evacuation assistance. Should we help them?" "Use the registered ships only. Keep the main fleet hidden for now. We cannot let anyone see our real capabilities until the right moment." "Understood, Admiral. What about the Devourer samples our scouts collected?" "The research teams are making good progress. We should have a complete analysis soon. These creatures are fascinating, but they have weaknesses. Everything does." The communication ended, and Chen sat back in her chair. Through the large window of her quarters, she could see dozens of alien ships preparing for war. Their crews believed they were about to face an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were right about that part. They just did not know that the enemy was not the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Somewhere in the dark space, between the stars, thousands of human ships waited in perfect silence. They had been waiting for 50 years, watching and learning everything about their galactic neighbors. Every weapon, every tactic, every weakness had been carefully studied and catalogued. The humans had not joined the Galactic Council seeking protection or trade opportunities. They had come to gather intelligence. And now, as the greatest crisis in galactic history began to unfold, they were almost ready to show the universe what Earth was really capable of. But not yet. The galaxy needed to learn the hard way that some problems could not be solved with conventional thinking. Only then would they be ready to see what humanity had been hiding in the darkness all along. The war room aboard the Krex flagship Thunder of Worlds buzzed with desperate activity. Holographic displays showed the advancing Devourer fleets like a spreading infection across the galactic map. Red markers indicated lost systems. Yellow ones marked worlds under attack. The green areas grew smaller with each passing day. General Korgthak stared at the main display with growing horror. The mighty Krex Empire had never retreated from any enemy. Their warriors were trained from birth to fight and die with honor. But this enemy was unlike anything they had ever faced. "Report from the 7th Fleet," announced a communications officer. "Admiral Velkin reports heavy casualties. The Devourers are adapting to our plasma cannons faster than expected." "How is that possible?" Korgthak demanded. "Our weapons can crack the crust of a planet. Nothing should be able to adapt that quickly." The officer looked uncomfortable. "The Admiral says the enemy ships are changing while they fight. They grow new armor where our weapons hit them. Some of the bioships are now completely immune to plasma fire." On another part of the bridge, a Zephyrian observer named Kethlon worked frantically at a complex control panel. The Zephyrians had joined the Krex fleet with their most advanced vessels. Their ships could manipulate reality itself, creating weapons that existed in multiple dimensions at once. "Our quantum disruptors are also losing effectiveness," Kethlon reported in his high musical voice. "The Devourers seem to be learning to exist partially outside normal spacetime. They are becoming harder to target with each engagement." Korgthak's clawed hands gripped the edge of the command table. The Krex had built their reputation on overwhelming firepower and aggressive tactics. Now they faced an enemy that could adapt to their weapons in real time. It was like fighting against an opponent who became stronger with every blow. "What do we know about their biology?" the general asked. A science officer stepped forward. She was from one of the minor species, a reptilian race called the Saurids. Our analysis suggests they are not entirely biological. The Devourers appear to be a hybrid of living tissue and some kind of adaptive technology. They consume matter and energy to fuel rapid evolution. Evolution? Korgthak repeated. Yes, sir. Each time they encounter a new weapon or defense, they integrate that information into their entire species. What one Devourer learns, they all learn instantly. They are becoming more dangerous with every battle we fight. The implications of this hit everyone on the bridge at the same time. The correct strategy had always been to learn from defeats and come back stronger. But against an enemy that evolved faster than any army could adapt, traditional warfare was useless. How many systems have we lost in the past week? Korgthak asked quietly. 12 confirmed. 3 more have gone silent and are presumed consumed. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on command ships from every major species. The Hive Collective's swarm tactics proved useless when the Devourers could track and counter millions of small ships simultaneously. The Vorthak's defensive specialists watched in horror as their supposedly impenetrable fortress worlds were consumed in hours rather than months. On the Zephyrian homeworld, the Council of Minds met in emergency session. These were the greatest intellects in the galaxy, beings who could calculate the movement of stars and predict the future through pure mathematics. Now they stared at equations that made no sense. The energy readings are impossible, declared Prime Calculator Yethmanor. The Devourers are consuming more matter than exists in the systems they attack. They are somehow creating additional mass from quantum vacuum. Could they be drawing energy from other dimensions? Asked another council member. That should be beyond any known technology. Even our most advanced research only hints at such possibilities. Then we are not dealing with technology as we understand it. We are facing something that operates by completely different rules. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories, refugee ships fled toward the galactic core. Families that had lived on the same worlds for generations packed everything they could carry and ran for their lives. The lucky ones escaped before the Devourers arrived. The unlucky ones simply vanished along with their entire star systems. Ambassador Chen stood in the human quarters of the council station, watching the refugee reports with apparent concern. Her assistant, a young man named David Park, worked at a nearby console tracking the evacuation efforts. The Altarian colony ships are 3 days out from Sanctuary Station, Park reported. But the Devourers are moving faster than predicted. They might not make it. Redirect the nearest Earth transport vessels to assist, Chen ordered. We can take on additional refugees if needed. Yes, ma'am. Should I contact Admiral Webb about deploying additional escort ships? Chen paused for a moment. No. Use only the registered vessels. We cannot break cover, even to save lives. Park looked uncomfortable with this order, but he nodded. He had been briefed on the larger situation. Sometimes difficult choices had to be made for the greater good. The human refugee ships were small compared to the massive vessels of other species, but they were surprisingly efficient. Earth's contribution to the evacuation effort went largely unnoticed by the alien governments. They were too busy with their own desperate situations to pay attention to minor species logistics. But the refugees themselves noticed something odd about the human ships. They were cleaner and more advanced than expected. The artificial gravity felt more natural. The life support systems worked better than equipment from species with centuries more experience in space travel. How do the humans afford such good ships? Asked a Saurid refugee to his neighbor. Maybe they are better at engineering than we thought, came the reply. None of them guessed that the transport ships they rode in were actually military vessels, with their weapons hidden and their true capabilities disguised. The humans had spent decades perfecting the art of looking harmless while being anything but. In the war rooms of the galaxy's greatest powers, military leaders faced the horrible truth. Every strategy they tried failed. Every weapon they deployed became useless within days as the Devourers adapted. The enemy was not just winning. They were learning to win faster with each victory. We need to consider the unthinkable, General Korgthak finally admitted during a joint command meeting. We may need to abandon the Outer Rim entirely and establish a defensive line closer to the core worlds. That means sacrificing billions of lives, protested a Zephyrian admiral. The alternative is losing everything. Korgthak replied grimly as the meeting continued. One commander quietly suggested something that had been whispered about for days but never spoken aloud. What about the humans? asked Captain Yethkala of the Vorthak Defense Forces. They offered to help at the beginning. Maybe we should have listened. The room fell silent. The idea that Earth's tiny fleet could make a difference seemed ridiculous. But then again, everything they had tried so far had failed. Perhaps desperation was making them consider impossible options. The humans have never fought in a real war, Veltar pointed out. Their ships are primitive. Their weapons are basic projectile systems. What could they possibly do against an enemy that has defeated our best fleets? Maybe nothing, admitted Captain Yethkala. But we are running out of alternatives. And sometimes fresh thinking can find solutions that experience misses. The debate continued, but no decisions were made. The proud leaders of the galaxy were not yet desperate enough to ask for help from a species they considered to be little more than talented farmers with basic space travel. But in the dark between the stars, Admiral Webb received regular reports on the deteriorating situation. The Devourers were performing exactly as human scientists had predicted. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would be ready to see what humanity had been preparing for all these years. The waiting was almost over. The Council emergency session had been going for 18 hours straight. Alien leaders who had once commanded respect across the galaxy now looked defeated and desperate. The Devourer advance had accelerated beyond all predictions. Core worlds that should have been safe for months were now under direct threat. So the Centauri defense line has fallen, reported Admiral Veltar, his proud warrior bearing finally broken. The Devourers consumed the entire fleet in 6 hours. Nothing escaped. Counselor Ethera's tentacles drooped with exhaustion. How many ships did we lose? All of them. 800 vessels, including 3 dreadnoughts and the flagship Eternal Glory. The Devourers did not just destroy them. They absorbed the wreckage and seemed to grow stronger. The chamber filled with the sound of despair from a dozen different species. Some made low moaning sounds. Others clicked or buzzed in distress. A few simply sat in stunned silence. "We need to evacuate the inner colonies," said Prime Calculator Yethmaner. "Mathematical models show we have perhaps days before they reach the core systems." "Evacuate to where?" demanded General Korgthak. "The Devourers move faster than our ships. They will catch any refugee fleet before it can reach safety." At the back of the chamber, Ambassador Chen listened to the debate with her usual calm expression. She had watched the galaxy's greatest powers crumble for weeks now. Soon it would be time to act, but not quite yet. A junior aide rushed into the chamber and whispered something to Counselor Ethara. Her face went pale, which was impressive considering her naturally gray skin. "I have just received word," she announced to the chamber. "The Devourers have been detected near the Sol system." Every head turned toward Ambassador Chen. For the first time since the crisis began, the human representative was the center of attention. But instead of looking worried or afraid, Chen simply nodded as if she had been expecting this news. "How long until they reach Earth?" asked Admiral Veltar. Chen checked a small device on her wrist. "According to our calculations, approximately 14 hours. You seem remarkably calm for someone whose homeworld is about to be consumed," observed Ketlan. "Panic rarely improves a bad situation," Chen replied simply. "The Council will do everything possible to evacuate your people," promised Counselor Ethara. "We owe humanity that much for your years of loyal service." Chen stood up slowly. Every alien eye in the chamber watched her with a mixture of pity and curiosity. The human looked so small and fragile compared to the mighty warriors and brilliant scientists around her. "That is very kind," Chen said. "But evacuation will not be necessary." The chamber fell silent. Several council members exchanged confused looks. "Ambassador," said Veltar gently, "I know this is difficult to accept, but Earth's defenses cannot stop the Devourers. No one's can. The best thing your people can do is run while there is still time." Chen shook her head. "Thank you for your concern, but Earth will be fine. In fact, I believe the threat will be eliminated shortly." This time, the silence was complete. The alien stared at the human as if she had lost her mind. How could anyone be so delusional about the situation? "Ambassador Chen," said Prime Calculator Yethmaner carefully, "perhaps the stress of the situation has affected your judgment. The mathematical certainty is absolute. No force in the galaxy can stop the Devourers." Chen smiled for the first time since the crisis began. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret that others would find very surprising. "You are right about one thing," she said. No force that you know about can stop them. Before anyone could ask what she meant, every communication system in the chamber activated at once. Screens lit up with an incoming transmission on all frequencies. The image that appeared showed a human in military uniform sitting in what looked like a ship's command center. "Attention, Galactic Council," the figure said. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Terra Defense Force. We have been monitoring the Devourer situation and have decided to intervene." The aliens stared at the screen in confusion. The Terra Defense Force was Earth's tiny military organization. They had perhaps 100 ships, all of them small and lightly armed. "Admiral Webb," said Counselor Yathara, "while we appreciate Earth's courage, this is not the time for symbolic gestures. Your fleet cannot possibly make a difference against this enemy." Webb's expression did not change. "With respect, Counselor, you have never seen our fleet." As he spoke, the chamber's tactical displays began showing new contacts appearing throughout the galaxy. At first there were dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of new signatures emerging from what had appeared to be empty space. "Impossible," whispered a Zephyrian observer. "Our sensors would have detected ships that large." The new contacts were indeed large. Each human vessel dwarfed the biggest dreadnoughts in the Krek's fleet, but more shocking than their size was their number. The displays showed over 50,000 ships spreading across multiple star systems. "Where did they come from?" demanded General Korgthak. Admiral Webb answered as if he had heard the question. "The Terra Defense Force has been operating in deep space for the past 50 years. We have been watching, learning, and preparing for threats like the Devourers." 50 years, repeated Veltar. "But humanity only developed space travel 60 years ago." "Humanity developed the space travel that you know about 60 years ago," Webb corrected. "Our real capabilities have been classified for obvious reasons." Ambassador Chen stepped forward to address the stunned chamber. "For half a century, Earth has maintained the fiction that we are a minor species with limited technology. This deception was necessary to gather intelligence about the various civilizations we might encounter." "Intelligence gathering?" The words came from a dozen different alien mouths at once. "Every weapon system you have ever built, every tactical doctrine you have ever used, every technological principle you have ever developed has been studied and catalogued by human observers," Chen explained. "We needed to understand the galaxy before we revealed ourselves." The tactical displays continued updating as more human ships appeared. The vessels moved with precision that made even Zephyrian formations look clumsy. They took positions throughout the galaxy with military efficiency that spoke of careful planning and extensive preparation. "Your ships," said Prime Calculator Yethmanor, staring at the energy readings, "they are operating on principles we do not recognize. Human science developed along different paths than yours," Admiral Webb replied. "We had to be creative when we realized we were not alone in the universe. Traditional approaches would not have been sufficient." General Korgthak leaned forward, his warrior instincts finally overcoming his shock. "What are your weapons capabilities?" "You will see shortly," Webb said. "The Devourer fleet approaching Earth will serve as an adequate demonstration." On the tactical displays, the alien leaders watched as the Devourer swarm closed in on the Sol system. The bioships moved in their usual chaotic pattern, impossible to predict or counter. Behind them came the harvester vessels that would consume the star itself once the planets were gone. But as the Devourers entered the outer edge of the solar system, something unexpected happened. Space itself seemed to bend around them. Reality twisted in ways that made no sense according to any known physics. "What are they doing?" asked Kethlan. "Something we learned from studying your dimensional manipulation technology," Webb answered. "Among other things, the Devourer fleet suddenly found itself trapped in a pocket of space that existed outside normal time. Their bioships tried to adapt, but they could not evolve defenses against attacks that came from fundamental alterations to the nature of reality itself. One by one, the Devourer vessels simply ceased to exist. They did not explode or break apart. They were there one moment and gone the next, as if they had never been created in the first place." "Remarkable," whispered Prime Calculator Yethminor. "They are not destroying the Devourers. They are editing them out of existence." "A useful technique," Admiral Webb agreed, "though it requires considerable preparation and coordination." Within minutes, the entire Devourer fleet was gone. The alien leaders stared at the displays in complete silence. trying to process what they had just witnessed. "The demonstration is complete," Admiral Webb announced. "We will now proceed to eliminate the remaining Devourer forces throughout the galaxy. This should take approximately 72 hours. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in shocked silence. Ambassador Chen looked around at the stunned alien faces. "I believe this concludes our discussion about evacuation procedures," she said calmly. For the first time in galactic history, no one had anything to say. Share artifacts, download all Part 1, the Underestimated Species document. MD. The observation deck aboard the Zephyrian science vessel Contemplation of Stars had never been designed for warfare. It was meant for peaceful study of cosmic phenomena. Now it served as a front-row seat to the most terrifying display of military power the galaxy had ever witnessed. Chief Observer Neth Kala watched the tactical feeds with growing horror and fascination. The human ships moved through space like living predators, hunting down Devourer biofleets with methodical precision. There was no emotion in their attacks, no unnecessary destruction. Just cold, efficient extermination, energy. Readings from the human vessels continued to defy analysis, reported science technician Vorthal. They appear to be drawing power from sources that should not exist. Explain, Nethakela demanded, never taking her eyes off the displays. According to our instruments, several human ships are extracting energy directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations. Others seem to be powered by controlled micro-black holes. Some readings suggest they have learned to harness the fundamental forces that hold atoms together. Nethakela's pale blue skin grew even paler. The Zephyrians considered themselves the masters of advanced physics. Their own ships bent space and time through careful manipulation of dimensional mathematics. But what the humans were doing was beyond anything her species had ever imagined. "How is such technology possible?" she whispered. On the tactical display, a group of human ships approached a massive Devourer swarm near the Vega system. The bioships immediately began their adaptive process, analyzing the approaching vessels and preparing countermeasures. It was the same process that had defeated every other fleet in the galaxy. But something was different this time. As the Devourers tried to scan the human ships, they seemed to encounter some kind of interference. Their adaptive systems flickered and failed. The bioships began moving erratically, as if they could not properly identify what they were facing. "The humans are using some kind of sensor disruption," observed Vorthal. "No," Nethkala corrected, her voice filled with awe and terror. "They are disrupting reality itself around their ships. The Devourers cannot adapt to weapons they cannot perceive." The human attack began without warning. Beams of energy that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously struck the Devourer formation. The bioships tried to evolve defenses, but how could they defend against attacks that came from directions that did not exist in normal space? Within minutes, the entire swarm was reduced to drifting particles. But the humans did not stop there. Additional ships moved through the debris field with scanning equipment that defied description. Every fragment, every spore, every trace of Devourer biology was systematically located and destroyed. They are not just winning battles, Nethkala realized. They are conducting a campaign of total extinction. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out dozens of times per hour. Human fleets appeared wherever Devourers were detected. The bioships that had adapted to every known weapon found themselves facing technology that operated by completely different rules. The Devourers tried to evolve new strategies. They attempted to scatter an attack from multiple directions. They developed new bioforms designed specifically to counter human tactics. Nothing worked. For every adaptation they made, the humans had already prepared 3 different countermeasures. On the Krek's flagship Thunder of Worlds, General Korgthak watched the reports with the eye of a professional warrior. His species had built their reputation on understanding combat better than anyone else in the galaxy. Now he was seeing warfare elevated to an art form he had never imagined. "Analysis of human tactical doctrine," he ordered his staff. Major Velthok, one of the finest strategic minds in the Krek's military, stepped forward with visible reluctance. "Sir, their tactics do not fit any known patterns. They seem to operate on principles we have never encountered. Elaborate. Traditional warfare involves action and reaction. You attack, the enemy responds, you adapt to their response. The humans appear to have skipped this process entirely. They attack with knowledge of how the enemy will respond before the response happens." Korgthak frowned. That is impossible. Yes, sir. But the evidence is clear. In every engagement, human forces deploy countermeasures for devourer adaptations before those adaptations occur. It is as if they can see the future. Or, suggested Communications Officer Yethmar, they understand the devourers better than the devourers understand themselves. The general considered this possibility. It was almost as disturbing as precognition. How could a species that had never fought the bioships before understand them so completely? The answer came from an unexpected source. During a brief lull in the fighting, a human fleet commander agreed to speak with Krek's observers. Captain Sarah Rodriguez appeared on their screens with the same calm professionalism that seemed to characterize all human military personnel. "You want to know how we fight so effectively?" she said without preamble. The question had occurred to us. Korgthak admitted. "The Devourers are not the first adaptive enemy we have encountered," Rodriguez explained. "On Earth, we spent thousands of years fighting opponents that could think, learn, and evolve their strategies in real time. What opponents could possibly compare to the Devourers?" Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Each other. Humans have been at war with other humans for our entire recorded history. We learned to fight enemies who were exactly as intelligent as we were, who could predict our moves because they thought like us." The implications hit the Krek's officers like a physical blow. Every other species in the galaxy had achieved peace within their own kind before reaching the stars. They had experience fighting aliens, but not fighting versions of themselves. "When you fight an enemy that shares your psychology," Rodriguez continued, "you learn to think in ways that transcend normal tactical doctrine. You learn to fight on levels that pure logic cannot reach." "The art of war," Korgthak said quietly. "Exactly, and once you master the art of fighting other humans, fighting aliens becomes almost simple by comparison. The Devourers are dangerous because they adapt quickly, but they adapt in predictable ways. They follow biological imperatives that we can model and counter." As if to demonstrate her point, Rodriguez's fleet engaged another Devourer formation. But this time, the human ships used completely different weapons and tactics than they had employed in previous battles. The bioships began adapting to the new threat, only to discover that the adaptation itself was a trap. The modified Devourer biology became vulnerable to a secondary attack that the humans had been holding in reserve. Within minutes, another swarm was extinct. "They are fighting a war of deception," realized Major Velthok. "Every battle is designed to teach the Devourers the wrong lessons." Throughout the galaxy, the systematic extermination continued. Human forces appeared to be everywhere at once, coordinating their attacks with precision that suggested a level of communication and planning that dwarfed anything the Council species had achieved. But perhaps most disturbing was the emotional detachment of the human warriors. They showed no excitement in victory, no anger at the enemy, no satisfaction in their superiority. They fought like scientists conducting an experiment, methodically testing hypotheses and recording results. "They do not hate the Devourers," observed Counselor Ythara during an emergency session. "They are simply removing them like a gardener removing weeds." "Is that better or worse than hatred?" asked Prime Calculator Yethmanor. No one had an answer to that question. As the 72nd hour approached, the last known Devourer concentration was located in a distant spiral arm. The bioships had evolved into forms that barely resembled their original configuration, desperately trying to find some defense against human weapons. The final battle lasted 3 minutes. When it was over, Admiral Webb's voice echoed across every communication system in the galaxy. "Devourer threat eliminated. All bioship concentrations have been destroyed. All harvester vessels have been neutralized. All traces of Devourer biology have been removed from galactic space. The operation is complete." The silence that followed was not the silence of celebration. It was the silence of a galaxy that had just learned what true power looked like. And somewhere in that silence, every alien civilization began to ask the same question. If the humans could eliminate the Devourers so easily, what else were they capable of? 3 months had passed since the last Devourer was destroyed. The galaxy should have been celebrating the greatest victory in recorded history. Instead, an uncomfortable quiet had settled over every civilized world. In the council chambers, debates that once raged for hours now ended in awkward silences. Military academies across dozens of species found their strategic doctrines suddenly obsolete. Ambassador Chen sat in her usual place at the back of the council chamber, watching the alien leaders struggle with their new reality. The emergency sessions had ended weeks ago, but the regular meetings continued with a strange, subdued atmosphere. No one quite knew how to address what had happened. The refugee resettlement program is proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Councillor Ithera, her voice lacking its usual authority. The human transport vessels have been remarkably efficient in returning displaced populations to their home systems, where those systems still exist, added General Korgthak quietly. It was true. The Devourers had consumed 17 star systems completely before the humans intervened. Those worlds were simply gone along with their billions of inhabitants. But the surviving refugees found that human ships were available to take them wherever they needed to go, free of charge. The Earth vessels are quite advanced, observed Prime Calculator Yethmanor, more advanced than we initially realized. This was the closest anyone had come to directly addressing the elephant in the room. Every species in the galaxy was quietly re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about human technology. The transport ships that had seemed adequate before now clearly incorporated engineering, principles that surpassed anything the Council had achieved. Has anyone determined how many ships humanity actually possesses? Asked Admiral Veltar. Our best estimates suggest at least 50,000 major vessels, replied a Zephyrian intelligence officer. Possibly more. They appear to have been building in secret for decades. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. The entire Krex fleet, built over centuries and considered the most powerful military force in the galaxy, numbered fewer than 8,000 ships. And the human vessels were individually larger and more capable than anything the Krex had ever constructed. Where were they hidden? Demanded Korgthak. Our deep space sensors should have detected construction on that scale. We have found evidence of extensive mining operations in star systems we believe to be uninhabited, the intelligence officer replied. It appears humans have been establishing secret colonies and industrial facilities throughout the Outer Rim for the past 50 years. Ambassador Chen listened to this discussion with her usual calm expression. She had been authorized to reveal certain information, but only if directly asked. So far, no one had worked up the courage to ask the real questions. Ambassador Chen, said Councillor Ithara carefully, perhaps you could help us understand the scope of Earth's actual capabilities. Chen stood slowly, aware that every eye in the chamber was focused on her. For 50 years, she and her predecessors had been treated as representatives of a minor species. Now she spoke for what was clearly the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. Earth's industrial capacity is substantial, she said simply. We have been preparing for various contingencies since we first learned of the galactic community. Contingencies such as the Devourers? Asked Yethmanor. Among other possibilities. The phrase sent a chill through the chamber. If the Devourers were just one possibility humans had prepared for, what were the others? Your weapons technology, said Admiral Veltar. It operates on principles we do not recognize. Where did such knowledge come from? Human science developed independently from galactic mainstream research, Chen replied. We had to work with different assumptions about the nature of reality. This was technically true, though it did not explain the full scope of human capabilities. In fact, Earth scientists had spent 50 years studying every piece of alien technology they could obtain. They had reverse-engineered Zephyrian dimensional manipulators, improved on Krex energy weapons, and combined principles from dozens of species into entirely new forms of science. But the aliens did not need to know that. Not yet. There are reports, said General Korgthak slowly, that human vessels were observed in locations where no ships should have been able to operate, near black holes inside stellar coronas, in regions of space where radiation levels should be instantly fatal. Human ships are built to operate in hostile environments, Chen confirmed. How hostile? Pressed the general. Chen paused for a moment, considering how much to reveal. Our vessels can function in any environment where matter can exist in any form. The implications of this statement were staggering. It meant human ships could operate inside stars, in the hearts of gas giants, in the crushing gravitational fields around black holes. The entire concept of naval strategy became meaningless when dealing with ships that could go literally anywhere. What about your military doctrine? Asked Veltar. Your tactical principles seem unlike anything in our historical records. Earth has extensive experience with adaptive warfare, Chen replied. Our military philosophy is based on preparing for opponents who can think and learn. This was the closest she could come to explaining that humans had spent millennia fighting other humans. The concept was difficult for alien species to understand, since most had achieved internal peace before developing space travel. The questions continued for another hour, but they danced around the edges of the real issue. No one wanted to directly ask whether humanity represented a threat to the rest of the galaxy. And Chen was not authorized to volunteer that information. Finally, the session ended with the usual polite formalities. As the alien representatives filed out, Chen noticed they moved differently than before. There was a wariness in their posture, a careful deliberation in their movements. They had learned to be afraid. That evening, Chen stood on the observation deck of the human quarters, looking out at the stars. The communication device on her wrist chimed with an incoming message from Admiral Webb. How are they adapting to the new situation? He asked when the connection opened. About as well as expected, Chen replied. They are asking questions, but not the right ones yet. And when they do start asking the right questions, we will answer them honestly. That was always the plan. Webb nodded. The fleet commanders are requesting guidance on their next assignments. Some of the deep space patrols are reporting unusual energy signatures near the galactic rim. More aliens? Chen asked. Possibly, or something else entirely. The universe is a big place, and we have only explored a small part of it. This was the truth that the council species were slowly beginning to understand. The galaxy they had known was just one small corner of a much larger cosmos. The Devourers had come from somewhere outside known space. There might be other threats, other civilizations, other challenges that required preparation. Continue the patrols, Chen ordered, but maintain the concealment protocols. The galaxy is not ready to learn about our full capabilities. Understood. What about the research projects? Proceed as planned. We have learned much from studying the Devourer biology. That knowledge may prove useful in the future. The transmission ended, and Chen returned to watching the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships maintained their vigil in the darkness between worlds. They watched for threats the galaxy did not know existed. They prepared for wars that might not come for centuries. The Galactic Council believed the crisis was over. They thought the Devourers had been an isolated threat, now eliminated. They assumed the galaxy could return to its peaceful status quo, with humans perhaps taking a slightly more prominent role in galactic affairs. They were wrong about all of these things. The Devourers had been a test, a way for humanity to reveal some of its capabilities without showing everything. The galaxy needed to understand that Earth was not helpless, but it was not yet ready to learn the full scope of human power. Because the truth was that the 50,000 ships the aliens had observed were just the ones humanity wanted them to see. The real fleet was much larger. The real capabilities were far more extensive. And the real purpose of the human presence in the galaxy was not trade or diplomacy. It was guardianship. Earth had taken on the responsibility of protecting a galaxy that did not know it needed protection. From threats that came from outside known space, from dangers that conventional military thinking could not address, from enemies that had not yet revealed themselves. The aliens would learn these truths eventually. But for now, they could sleep peacefully in their beds, secure in the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness, human ships stood watch. And in that darkness, the galaxy remained silent. Not with the silence of peace, but with the silence of a cosmos holding its breath, waiting to see what other surprises the universe might have in store. The waiting would not last forever. But it would last long enough for humanity to finish its preparations for whatever came next. After all, the Devourers had been just the beginning.